People who cater to the super rich, what things have you seen? At 806 said, my dad's client bought a whole block of houses to build theirs. It is so wide that they installed a moving walkway like the ones at airports. The Apprentice Life said, I used to do pool and spa maintenance in my 20s. I worked on one property with a mountainside, 10-bedroom/14-bath mansion, with a saltwater pool, tennis courts, guest mansion, and a servant's house that was 4-bedroom 5-bath. The property had so much more stuff, but that isn't the crazy thing. I worked on this property for 2 years, year-round, 5 days a week, and not a single person was ever there. The middle-aged, single woman that owned it lived in a city about 4 hours away and just didn't come to the property, because she was so busy with work. A multi-million-dollar compound, just empty. All the time. The Apprentice Life said, finally, after 2 years, I got a call from my boss on my day off. He asked if I could go to the house to put some pool floats away. He apologized, because it was my day off, but said the owner would pay me $500 to go put them away. I was confused as to why there were even pool floats out anyway, because nobody was ever there, but I figured fuck it, $500 for 10 minutes. I show up to the house and the woman's adult children were staying at the house with about 10 plus kids between them all, and they were having a massive pool party cookout. I awkwardly walked up and said to one of the parents, sorry, it must have been a mistake, but I was told to come put pool floats away, but you're obviously here so I'll leave. Presumably the woman's adult son said, oh, no, we're getting ready to leave. You can take them. Then he instructed the kids to push them towards me. I literally grabbed one inner tube float and 4 pool noodles, brought them 10 feet into the pool house, and put them away. I, confusedly, said they were all set and went to leave. The son thanked me and handed me a folded mass of $20 bills. It was $400. I was expecting $500 from my boss for payment, but I figured $400 cash was still overpayment, so I didn't mention it. The next day at work, my boss gave me $1,000. I told him the son had already paid me $400, which was fine. He said the son told the woman how great a job I did, so she wanted to pay me $1,000 instead of $500 and the $400 was a tip from her son. For 10 minutes of work. She actually called my boss the next day to ask if she should reimburse me for gas, since it was 15 minutes from my house. I told him that I was all set. Mickadub9er said, worked at a restaurant where a few of the regulars were the children of billionaires. I told my parents that my tuition costs $500,000 a student, from China, in America. I overheard after being asked how she has so much money. Another time I was serving a table I was asked to bring a tray of 60 patron shots, $600, for a 19-year-old student. I must have had an incredulous look on my face because his only response to assuage my concern was my father owns diamond mines in Africa. Clovis' son said, my dad works in shipping and has a lot of friends who have worked on super yachts. In the 90s one of his mates got a call up to bring the yacht of a particular Australian media tycoon billionaire, not that one, from Sydney to New York, with instructions to be anchored in a particular bay at an exact time with a lunch spread for 50 people ready. So they got there and set up the food. The guy never showed up. Turns out he was having a rich dude party in a building overlooking the harbor and wanted to be able to point down and say that's my boat. He wanted the lunch just in case he decided to take his rich friends down to his yacht, but he didn't feel like it that day, so all the food got wasted and they sailed back to Oz without seeing him. Duanit Oberman said, I heard an interview on the radio from a guy who was from my hometown in the UK who was Stallone's personal chef in the 90s. He said Stallone was a nice guy, he had something in his house where he could watch the amount of tickets his films was selling in lifetime so knew almost immediately whether it was a flop or not. He was married to Bridget Nielsen at the time and this chef said she was walking about topless or naked all the time which he thought was strange until she walks up to him one time when Stallone was out and offered it to him on a plate. He politely declined because he liked Stallone and they were divorced a few years later so there may have been other things going on. Opinionated Nonsense said, I worked at a low-end retail store and had a rich woman spend $1,500 on clothes. She didn't try any of them on, and she filled 2 shopping carts. As I was ringing her up we had a long time to chat because the transaction took so long, and she told me that she hated clothes shopping. She would occasionally just buy a bunch of random stuff and put it in her closet, and anything she didn't like as she was getting dressed she would simply throw away. Edit. I also just want to add that this customer was extremely unpleasant and rude to us lowly cashiers, and bragged about the limit on her credit card and how much money she had. This makes me think she was newly rich, or maybe only moderately rich. Pruna Hedges said, I used to work for a company that modified aircraft for really rich people. I'm talking 747s, not Gulfstreams. This company had made several aircraft for this one customer, who I was told had purchased a new one solely because his spiritual advisor had told him that one of his current planes was bad luck. He still let his wife use it for her personal travel. To me, one of the most exquisite features of these planes wasn't the gold-plated everything, or rare wood veneers, it was the silk carpet. That stuff cost over $1,000 per square foot and feels like walking on a bed of angel feathers harvested in the most inhumane way possible. Granted, these guys don't deck out the whole plane, just their personal areas. The aft third is usually reserved for staff and such and is more like a fancy economy class, but yeah, silk carpet. Steamcore said, I did IT work for a tiny little private company like the owner, his brother, and me guy called because his new PC wouldn't turn on and it's like 3 p.m. He was 100% willing to pay for me to drive 5 hours one way to get it working today because he wanted to play games today. Okay, so 5 hours road trip one way and the address is this huge fucking mansion. 100% thought I was in the wrong place. Use the intercom at the gate to know this is the place. Guy and his wife are really cool and the dude had built his own gaming rig. It was absolutely over the top. I had never even laid eyes on hardware that expensive before. He never turned the power switch on his Swan. He paid the base rate of $1,400 for me to come out there to flip a switch. I also installed his graphic drivers, but that was technically free, and then gave me $5,000 cash as a tip, all because he was excited to play League of Legends on his new PC. Edit. Thank you all for the awards. Tobias269 said, have been working for the super rich for some time. Craziest thing I've seen, brand new 90-meter multi-million pound, GBP, yacht was built in Netherlands. Maiden voyage to Antibes in France. Owner came on board and left after a few hours. Next week we get sent to Genoa, Italy, where all the bathrooms on board were ripped out and upgraded. That doesn't sound like a big deal, but I'm talking about brand new marble sinks, showers, floors and lobbies all crowbarred out, chucked in skips. Tons of brand new polished marble binned. New marble colors and patterns arrived in the weeks following. There's feed me money, there's fuck you money, and there's it's not even a thought money. Jag23 said, I went to a New England prep school for high school on a full-ride sports scholarship. There were a decent amount of foreign national students, mainly from Asia, that came from extremely wealthy families. One of those students' parents bought him a brand new BMW 5 Series, fully loaded, when he got his license our junior year. When we graduated a year later, he was going back to Korea and obviously couldn't take the car, so he gave it to his best friend. Kid got an $80 K car at 17 years old, just for being good friends with the right guy. I'll never forget that. Victor72 said, I tutored a wealthy 5-year-old. I got paid good money to spend an hour drawing and coloring and playing with this kindergartner, but all in French. He had been to more places in the world by 5 than I'll ever go to in my whole lifetime probably. The best part of the job were the perks, though. They would take me and my so out to dinner at fancy restaurants and pay the bill no matter what it was. They would invite us over to eat some delicacy they prepared. Wife was Chinese Vietnamese, husband was Indian, and they'd always have some house guest staying with some crazy resume. For example, one time they had a diplomat for the Netherlands there to do business. They had houses in my city and in San Francisco and would fly there all the time. They invited me on several occasions, but I never had time to go. I also befriended and stayed with the daughter of Russian oligarch who lived in Paris. The mom was a famous writer and the dad did something in business. Their grandfather was a famous Soviet writer, and so in general they lived a very cultured life. They lived in the richest part of Paris called Neuilly-sur-Seine and had houses in the Alps, Crimea and Moscow. The crazy part, or rather sad part, was that she only had a few options for a career. She could be a doctor, a lawyer, or a businesswoman. Their son was lucky enough to study at the Geneva Conservatory, but that was only because he was really talented. In this family, If you didn't have a natural artistic talent, you only had those 3 career prospects to choose from. I had the impression that she was rather depressed about how limited her options were and how much pressure was put on her to succeed. Lizzie Aspermer said, I became personal friends with my boss and his wife, super nice people. The wife turned out to be an heiress and would buy me whatever I mentioned, like in passing during a conversation. I learned gifts were how she was raised to show love. I've trained myself to only talk about things I already own, unless I find something useful she might like and suggest it for her. Zephyrus said, I'm not super rich or anything, but I think gifts are kick-ass and I'd much rather spend my money on a cool gift for a friend who can use it than on something extra I don't need. I was a software engineer while most of my friends were in grad school, med school, working low-paying jobs, so I've enjoyed being able to chip in or get nice things for them when they said they couldn't. I do always make sure they're okay with it and ask if I can in advance so nobody ends up uncomfortable. Ray said, was invited to a Christmas dinner while I lived in Seoul by an extremely wealthy Korean family. Very nice family, but I think in hindsight they wanted to show their friends that they had foreign friends like me. Wife had everything catered and the home professionally decorated. It felt like we were in a department store. Multiple Christmas trees, a working train set, staff handing out appetizers on plates, etc. It looked like she studied Christmas movies from the USA and copied everything. Dinner is served on a comically long table with 2 huge oven-roasted turkeys and all of the trimmings. They looked perfect. I was later told that Koreans don't like turkey and were just for decoration. They would be thrown out later. We ate Korean food. The family said I could take a turkey home and that the caterer would drop it off with anything else I wanted. Amber Binkin said, this was ages ago. I worked in a DVD store. A woman came in with 5 A4 pages, double-sided, of movie titles and just asked me to fetch what we had. I ran about and collected DVDs and Blu-rays close to 1K worth. I asked what they were for. She was a PA for a billionaire and getting them for his yacht. Kiz said, Keith also bought a couple of guitar pedals for a local kid here in one of the guitar shops. Kid had a budget and was struggling to pick one, so Keith just bought them both for the kid by quietly paying the shop owner on the way out the door, before the kid even knew what he'd done. By all reports he's a genuine decent, down-to-earth bloke. Santa Monsanto said, yay, that's the key here. No matter how he paid and what change he received for the payment, Keith Urban pulled an additional $1 out of his pocket to supplement the tip. Obviously the amount wasn't significant, but the gesture speaks. It might just be because I've worked in service my whole life, but these actions speak to me. Good on you, Keith Urban. Stay humble. User off the internet 999 said, I am an art student working as a gardener. We work in one of the wealthiest areas in my country. Some customers are really eager to show me their collection of artworks that they have hanging on their walls once they find out that I study it. I remember one time standing in a bathroom with my dirty gardening clothes and there was a Picasso above the toilet. Circleen Sadezirkle said, I used to work for an Arab billionaire's son, a daddy's money guy. Terrible garbage human being. Once saw him spend $16,000 on a wallet. Was a fancy one with little gold spikes on it and stuff. He had shoes with gold on them. I remember one year for his birthday he received like 30+ cakes, big fancy cakes, and he told us to leave them on the floor in the hallway outside his room. We walked by those cakes every day for 2 weeks waiting for instruction. After the 2 weeks we were told to throw them away. Chromatics said, one of my friend's parents won a $50 million lottery. We used to work together in the few years we knew each other before that happened, so they know of the struggle of spending most of your days working in food service to earn a few grand a month. Fortunately they haven't changed as a person, so I still like spending time with them. But it was hard to watch someone I used to be in the same boat spend more money than I make in 2 months on a bag last time we went shopping. Well, they did. I couldn't afford the air in the places we visited. MLE32000 said, I used to install DirecTV in wealthy areas of an East Coast city in the US. While I try to give customers options on where I install the satellite dish, I have to get a good line of sight for it to work properly, so sometimes the location options were limited. One rich lady's house, gorgeous house right on the beach, I only found 2 good spots for the dish. It could either be on a pole in the middle of her backyard, or on the corner of the roof. She definitely did not want it in the middle of her yard. Only problem was that she had a metal roof and we used specific mounting hardware for that. We happened to be back-ordered on that hardware for a few weeks out. When I informed her of this, she got visibly upset that she'd have to wait that long to get her cable up and going. I apologized many times and told her she'd need to reschedule a few weeks later, and I leave 3 days later. I'm looking over my work orders for the day and I notice her name and address. I'm like, wow, I bet she thinks she's getting a different installer who she can try to convince to give her a different answer. I was wrong. I pull up to the house, brand new shingle roof. I did the install on the roof. Cook During Sleep said, as a chef, I've seen, heard, and accommodated all sorts of bizarre requests. Michael J. Fox's kid loves overcooked spaghetti in ketchup. Run DMC dips shrimp tempura in ketchup. Drake won't eat anything but well-done steak. Bill Gates is actually surprisingly casual, and Larry Ellison will go out of his way to thank the staff, even go as far as to cheers with Louis Z.I. Migas brought dino nuggets for us to cook. Adam Devine has paid tabs for the entire restaurant. Snoop gave the kitchen blunts. Can I eat breakfast alone? I've snuck Dirt Nasty into a private party. The list goes on. Sean DBL said, worked for a hedge fund guy. The kids were actually more or less like regular kids, but he and his wife thought everyone was dumber than they were, not something I gleaned from anything explicit, but an undertone that was present all the time. He was pretty sharp. His wife not so much. Everyone hated her. Everyone she knew and worked with. Everyone would take the opportunity to blow her up the second she left a room because she was so unbelievably fake, petty, spoiled, and demanding. Even some of her friends would do it. He tried to convince me he was paying me too much and tried to negotiate me down. Then in a subsequent conversation asked me if I thought it would be cool for him to buy his son a 400-ounce gold bar. His son was 5 at the time. Luther Williams said, when rich people want to buy a Jaguar in the UK, they get assigned a special salesperson who is incredibly knowledgeable. They meet in a special fancy office, and special arrangements can be made. This was my friend Chris' job. He had access to things that a normal Jaguar salesperson wouldn't have. Like he could ring up the manager of the factory for special requests level of access. Well, a Saudi price wanted to buy this new Jaguar that had been released, so they met up and spent a full day speccing the Jaguar out. I believe the final price was something like $125K for the vehicle. Then came the decision for color. At the time the factory had 16 different color choices for this model. The prince asked if he could sleep on it as it was getting late and almost time for dinner prayer. My friend Chris says of course, and they set a time to meet the new morning. The next morning the Saudi price is like, I figured out an acceptable solution to my color dilemma, to which Chris goes, and what would that be? The Saudi prince goes, I'll order one of each color. And my friend Chris is like, oh well, of course. They quote delivery time. Saudi prince was fine and asked for his options and was presented with ocean travel options, to which the prince said, what about air cargo? Chris, thinking maybe they'd do one or to buy air cargo and the rest by boat. The prince was like, no, I want all 16 vehicles loaded on a plane and flown to Saudi Arabia. So that's the story on how 16 of the same Jaguar with different colors ended up being flown to Saudi Arabia, all in the total cost was around $2.5 million. Please note the prices should be pound symbol, not dollar sign. Insert clever thought said, it's like a micro experiment in price anchoring and a good example of how quickly numbers become abstract and meaningless in our minds. I wonder if writing it as $2.50 instead of $2,500,000 has anything to do with it too. Marketers use this stuff all the time with selling upgrades. Like I was buying a mattress online and then the process took me to a pitch page about how awesome their pillows are. These pillows were over $100 each and I would never consider them as a standalone purchase, but tacked onto the cost of the mattress it was easy to say, oh that's not so bad, it only raised my overall purchase price a few %. Cholula is good said, some extremely wealthy people I have been around have a more acute sense of their own time and mortality, leading to impatience. Like they understand how awesome their lives are and therefore how short they feel. I knew a guy whose vintage yacht broke down before summer, so he bought another one strictly for that upcoming summer. His reasoning was he likely had 20 full health summers left in his life and didn't want to spend one of them without a boat, considering he had the means to. Honestly, can't argue with that logic. Labakan said, nothing too fancy, but I used to help build multi-million-dollar homes about a decade ago. One couple, neurosurgeon and dentist, had an office with one of those bookcase doors leading under the stairs. They stored their surround sound equipment and a safe in there. Another house had a very micromanager-esque woman as the owner along with her husband. She would regularly come to the site and order the workers around while the foreman sighed and rolled his eyes at her. At one point he had to order her off the site because she was being a safety hazard to his workers. I remember this couple also has a creepy setup for their kids, 2 bunk beds on either side of a wall for the kids, and both rooms led to a bathroom facing the road with a big bay window right next to the tub. So essentially, any person driving or walking past, or any neighbor could just look over and see these kids taking a bath. Saganauticon said, I've worked with some fairly wealthy people in the developing world. More or less new money, people who have been successful with some business venture or other. Overall, they're a bit out of touch with the realities of the world. I used to think that they were a bit naive too, because I saw a lot of other people taking advantage of them, outright robbing them. Over time, I realized while that's not untrue, it's more complicated. They did fail to notice a lot of uncollegiate activity on the part of the people they hired, but not all of it. What they did notice, they wrote off as the cost of finding people they could trust with projects that were actually important to them, and at work with for years. So yeah, you could overbill them for a few $1,000s once or twice, but if you worked hard and produced results instead, you could bootstrap your whole business to the next level with just them as a client. Eventually, I realized they valued trust a lot more than they valued money. They made their money with fairly long-term, high-risk, high-reward ventures running in parallel, for example research. So it all makes a little more sense now. I know plenty of rich useless people too, but not very well. A lot of wealth is simply inherited in Asia. Cash flow is a really difficult thing here. Some people think they're important because they're born rich and act like fools. They do some pretty wild stuff, but I don't stick around to hear about it. Undefined Protocol said, my great-uncle was very well off. He did not have a guest house. It was a guest mansion, separate from his mansion, in case his kids dropped by. This does not include the Olympic-sized indoor pool. That was a separate building. He bought a cannon. He used it to shoot the mountain behind his house. He shot brand new special bowling balls out of it. They cost $100 per ball. Edit, I'm not sure of the actual size of the pool, but it was definitely bigger than most community pools. But if you want to see the cannon in action, Nitro Circus came by and shot a car with it in one of their episodes. I didn't expect this comment to explode, so I didn't mention the human slingshot. There have been a few viral videos made about it.